If you want to learn about painting fabric, my next guest is going to share some ideas with us. Joining me is Cindy Walter. Welcome, Cindy.
Well, thank you, Donna. My pleasure to be here.
Painting fabric is so much fun, isn't it?
Oh, I'm just addicted. I love painting fabric. If I need a piece of purple and I don't have time to go to town to get it, I just paint it.
How great.
Yeah, it's
fun. And it's easy.
It's very easy, and there's only a few basic things you need to know. First, most important is to be set up with the right supplies. You see that we have a plastic drop cloth or plastic cloth on our table, and a roll of paper towels are handy, and a pitcher of water to dilute our paints, another little pitcher or cup to rinse our brushes, and a spray bottle of water to spritz our fabric if we want to work with wet fabric, and then a variety of brushes, all types, from inexpensive bamboo oriental brushes to paint brushes, even to sea sponges. We'll use all these different tools to put it on.
Great.
And I'm going to have you help me today, so you're going to wear my gloves.
Push up my sleeves and put on the gloves and get ready here.
And the thing you'll see about painting fabric is it's really not messy. I mean, we're just protecting our area, and I have my painting jacket on, so just a little bit of gloves is all you need.
Good. Let me see if I can get this finger in there. There we go.
Great. Okay. Now, the paint we're going to use mostly, I'll show you a few others, but for the most part, we're going to use a transparent paint. And transparent paints used directly from the bottle or slightly diluted have a really wonderful soft hand. So it just feels like it's been dyed. And the neatest thing about paints is they're heat set. So I have no chemicals, no mess here, and when I'm done, I just take it to the ironing board and iron it. And it's
that
done.
sets it?
It's done. It's great. Yes. And you can also even put it in the dryer. Once it dries, put it in the dryer for 30 seconds to heat set it too. Okay. So you just simply set it.
And then do you wash them before you use them, or use them just like that?
I don't, but you certainly can, because they're permanent and they're completely set, so you can.
Okay.
The first thing we have to decide before we paint is whether we want to work on our project wet or dry. So I'm going to spritz half of my piece of fabric and show you the difference. So I have just a gardening spritzer here, and I'm going to work with a sulfur green and a purple. And I like to use, with this transparent paint, you can dilute it or you can use it straight from the bottle. And you don't want to dilute much more paint than you're going to use that day, because once you dilute it, it ruins the antibacterial agent that's in the paint. So diluting it way down, the paint can spoil after a few days. So just keep it undiluted, or if you're going to dilute it, use it directly that day.
Okay.
Now I want to show you the difference, how this paint flows. If I'm going to take, I'm working with just a very inexpensive little rubber sponge here. And look at here, I'm on the wet, and I go over to the dry, and the dry is much denser and darker, but the wet gave me a wonderful watercolor type of a feeling. So you can see the difference. And now let me change my colors and go into my purple, and let me show you what that does. Now, one thing about paints, uncharacteristic from dyes, is that it doesn't show its true color while it's wet. So for me to see the exact true color of this, I'll have to let it dry. And the faster it dries, the darker the color, and the longer it dries, the lighter, which is strange. So since this is very wet, when it dries, it has a lighter, softer pastel type of feeling. Right. Since this side was dry, when it dried, it has a denser, darker feeling. Okay? So that's the first thing you have to know. And of course, let me wipe off my little area to show you the next. Once you realize how to get a lighter or darker color like we just did, the next thing is how to apply it. There's so many ways, and they're all fun. We can simply do long, thin brush strokes like we just did, and that's a super easy, fast, fun way, horizontal strokes and abstract strokes. Or we can take our brush, or let's take a brush first, and we can take our brush and we can apply it by dabbing it. And this gives you a wonderful, wonderful look. And here I can dab my first color.
You must love doing this.
It's so fun and free. And so there's just no way you can make a mistake. Right. And I can dab all my paints on. And so, for instance, let me show you, and I would keep dabbing and add more. And also, very fun is to use your sea sponges. And you get different characters and other little different things on here. And of course, I would use gloves at home, but I've given you mine because I'm going to put you to work here in a second. So there's an easy way, and let me show you the difference. Always keep your work surface clean in between, and you can just wipe it off with a cloth or a paper towel. So this is the difference. Here I've put it on with strokes, and here I've dabbed it on.
Okay.
Isn't that pretty interesting?
Very pretty.
Same exact paints and same exact colors.
But a totally different
Totally
look.
different effect. Another example of that is here I have long linear strokes, and I did a little metallic over that, which I'll show you in a minute. But the same exact paints, with just by dabbing it on, gave me this look. So aren't they beautiful?
They
They're custom
really
designed
are.
pieces. Oh, the backs are always pretty too. We have to always show the backs. But custom designed fabrics that you just apply the paint so easily, there's no way you can make a mistake. I'm often asked how to make a beautiful sky, and so I can show you. To make a sky, I take one of my whites or lighter paints, and I brush most of the entire base with the white or lighter paint. And you can use a little opaque and transparent paints and other things. And once I get my white down, then I would go ahead and dilute my different blues that I want to use by putting
Right
it
into the white.
Right into the white. And at this point, I can go ahead and take this and sponge a little blues on like this. And I would go ahead and sponge quite a bit on, then come back with a dry brush and just incorporate it in.
And blend them together.
And blend it in until I get a look that looks like this. So it's just blend back and forth, and that's a beautiful sky. And I achieve that by putting the white first. Now, often people ask me too how to make a beautiful water. And I'm going to have you just experiment.
Oh my.
And here we have a beautiful piece of water. And I want you to take a couple strokes, and I want you to do this while I show the viewers some of the other pieces, but let me pour you a few paints here.
You're sure you want me to do this
I
one?
want you to do this. I'm going to dampen this just because it's easier to work on damp fabric. And so you can go ahead and
just across the fabric is what I'm doing.
That's right. Let me give you a brush here. Always make sure you wipe your brush to make sure there's no residual color or paint in and clean it. And I like to work with a little bit diluted. Let me dilute it a little more, just a tiny bit for you. Just about 25% would be the max that you need for this one.
Should I start across?
Go ahead and start across and leave yourself some white spots so that you can come back in with the next color.
Oops, I'm not doing too well here.
You could also, to help yourself out, would be to tape your, that's beautiful. Now go in with that one perhaps. You can tape your, and then we'll end with this one. Perfect, that's gorgeous. And you can tape your piece down to the base with masking tape or something to help you work out. While Donna's working on that one, I want to show you a few that I've made recently. This is for a snippet project, and this is the foundation, where on the top is the sky, and I've reflected down into the water. And I'm going to put a horizon with boats across there, so you can paint your own foundations. Another, oh, that's gorgeous. You could come in with extra colors, perhaps even this darker, and add little extra dark colors around and mix it up. Another great technique would be to scrunch it. So that would be working with the fabric. Scrunch this up into a pile for me. That's it. And we work with the fabric in a pile, and then when it dries, you get valleys and peaks where the different colors dry. And this is a good example of the blue, same exact color she's using, but where it dried with scrunches on it. So now we have hundreds of things that we can do with the paints and many ways that we can apply them. But I do want you to notice the quilts that I've made using the painted fabrics.
And all the different techniques.
All the different techniques are in there. And one of my newest quilts that I just made, one of my favorite, is the quilt that's going off to Europe for the lily quilt. And I painted all of those from start to finish. So I hope that everyone can see how easy painting fabric is.
Well, thank you for showing me how much fun it can be, too.
Good. Great. Thank you.
Welcome to Quilt Central's Gallery of Quilts. Our tour begins with Sundancer, an exciting quilt by Cindy Walter and Deborah Sylvester. This purple star with fireworks quilt by Marilyn Badger explodes with personality. Golden rings adorn this quilt by Marilyn Badger. Marilyn Badger says this quilt is almost cruel. Days of Wine and Roses was pieced by Nicole Chambers and quilted by Marilyn Badger. Pastel stars embellished this quilt by Marilyn Badger. Marilyn Badger's quilt, Sorabelle's Garden, celebrates nature's beauty. Vibrant colors take center stage on Dragon by Kathy Franks. Jane Donaldson created this quilt of colorful purple stars. Tranquility Surrounds Water Lilies by A. Rossman. Laurel by A. Rossman is simply stunning. African Dancer is a striking quilt by Kathy Franks. Design 1 is quilted by Kathy Franks. This charming diamond pattern quilt was created by Jane Donaldson. Quilt Central is proud to share with you this gallery of quilts.
Today you have seen some wonderful and creative things. And now we have Nancy Knaus with us today. Hi, Nancy.
Oh, hi, Janie.
What's this piece here that you have brought with you today?
Well, what I have done, this inspiration came from a piece of fabric that I came across. It was just absolutely magnificent. I couldn't go home without it. And then once I got it, it was like, now what am I going to do with it? So I decided to use the fabric itself, and what I did was I took the fabric and I cut out around the existing dye on the fabric, and then cut out little motifs like if they were going to be flowers. And then once I did that, I put it on some fusible bonding, and then once you put that on there, you just peel it off and you stick it just in the different areas of your pattern.
Wherever you want.
Wherever you want it. And then once you do that, and then, of course, then you just press it into place, and then you can quilt over the top of it.
So the design is, you're totally original, it's all yours, it's just the way you like it.
Right, and then just like with my threads, I went to my thread stash. I went out there and I just pulled it out and just laid it out there and decided, well, let's see, what do I want to do? And I just figured, well, what would best bring out the fabric on it?
Mm-hmm. It is beautiful. I tell you, this is a gorgeous piece. Anybody would love to have that in their home. All those dyed fabrics are so popular now, and they just help your imagination to run wild.
Oh, definitely. Another thing, too, that I had done with doing this process is that I only put the quilt top in. So that way, if I had any little bird's nests underneath, they're not going to show.
Oh, I see. You're just using 2 rollers.
Right, on the back side of my quilt.
Mm-hmm.
So once I get it all done, I will take it out of the frame. I'll square it up or put my borders on or whatever way I want to do it. And then I will put my quilt back and my batting back in and then put this in. And then I will just outline around my flowers, or if I might want to embellish it some more, something that, once I take it out and look at it as a whole, and I'll say, well, gee, I could have added this and added that to it. And
so you have a second chance to get all the colors in there just right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to see you do a little bit of it. Could you show us?
Sure. What I'll do is I'll go into the leaves, and what I do is I just go ahead and start. And there's really no special way of having to do this. You just go in there, you just embellish the leaves, put the little veins in them. This, I'm using a little bit of a lighter thread. I will go back and use a darker thread to give it more depth to it. I'll even use some of the metallic threads into it. Like my flowers, I will start off in just a little circle.
To give it a center.
Just give it a little center. You can make it like little stars. It's just endless what you can do. You can go off the edges. There are no rules to machine quilting.
Just free imagination.
Exactly.
That is just beautiful.
When I go off to another area, all I'll do is just lift up my presser foot.
You don't even have to cut your thread.
Right, and then go on to my next spot where I want to quilt.
So you can clean that all up off the top later, but because the other layer comes on the back, the second quilting, you don't even have to worry about those threads.
Right.
That is really nice. Well, when you finish this piece, then you can just have only the background like meandering in there, or you can do another type of innovative quilting back there too.
You can do that. What I did on my first project, I just did some meandering here, but I also, when I went off to the ends of my little leaves or my branches, I went off with my decorative threads and I just did little swirls, or I did kind of like an embroidery with the thread.
Loops and fill-ins.
And just did some fill-ins here, so it's not just this one little general area.
Well, I just love that piece, and I'd be happy to have that in my home.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for showing us this.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having us.
If your machine has an embroidery attachment, I know you're going to enjoy what my next guest is going to show us. Joining me is Marlis Bennett. Welcome, Marlis.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Let's take a look at the quilt that we're going to be making, or I'm going to be describing today. It's got lots of embroidery on it, and it has a Bargello border around the embroidery. And those are the two things that we're going to concentrate on.
What do you call this quilt?
It is called a walk through my garden because all of the flowers in the vase have some significance in my life.
Oh, how lovely.
Let's talk about the embroidery. Embroidery is really a lot of fun, and you can really enhance what you're doing with your quilting just by adding a few embroidery motifs. And don't think that they have to be stitched directly on fabric.
Oh, okay. You can make like a patch.
Yes, or have them dimensional, because if you only tack them down a little bit, then they kind of flutter in the wind, just like they would in your garden. What I have done is I have used a very gauzy type fabric. This is polyester organza, and I backed it with a semi-transparent cutaway stabilizer.
Okay.
And then hoop all of this into a hoop the appropriate size for my embroidery. I've taken a design off of a design card that just plugs directly into the side of the machine. So everything is done for you. All you have to do is change your thread colors for when the machine stops, go to the next color. And all of that information is on a sheet that looks like this. They come for each design card, and it tells you the different colors that you'll want to use for your design. Even gives you color numbers. So it really makes it very easy. Once I have stitched my design, I will take my design off of the machine, and then I'm going to use something that's usually found in our sewing rooms if you're a quilter. This is a stencil cutter.
Okay.
And we've plugged it in so it's very hot. Notice that I've left everything in my hoop, and I now have this hoop on a glass, a piece of glass. And if you have a broken picture frame, that's a good place to find those. Or even in the craft stores, you can find the glass, and they sell it just by itself. Notice how I'm going around my design, and what's going to happen is that all of this design is going to come away from the backing of the fabric. So you're just left with, let me just put this down right here, an embroidery design that looks similar to this.
Isn't that clever? And if you want to change the colors, you can trial and error, figure out how you want to do it?
Well, I just pick up the colors that are in the fabrics that I'm using. And then that way I know that things are going to work for me. And you can come up with various different looks to all of your embroideries. And then you just use monofilament thread and free motion them onto your background piece.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I love the way all those flowers look together.
Well, and see, you can put crinkles and curves into them.
You've done a lot of that on the piece.
And you get a lot more dimension going.
Yes. Great.
So let's do the Bargello now, because it's really a very easy technique. You cut your strips of fabric, and I have cut them 1.5 inches. That way when I'm finished, I have 1-inch blocks in my piece. You strip them all together, and this is just a shortened portion, but I went the entire width of
across the fabric,
and did probably about 3 of these.
Okay.
Because that way it gave me more room to play. I've sewn them all together, and once they're sewn together, you sew them together one more time into a tube. That way, when you are ready to put your Bargello together, because if you look at the quilt, you can see the waves that were created. You would need to trim these in different portions. So after this is done, then you cut them into 1.5 inch strips. Again, so that you have the little pieces like this, and then you have to pick a spot where to separate your strip, and each one would be separated after a different color.
Exactly.
So that once you have all of your strips done, you just take your strips and begin to lay them out, one right next to the other, and you can see
them up.
The
or
wave,
down.
or down as you desire, and you can see the wave pattern begin to come about.
The trick, I think, is making the circle, because so often people just sew them in a strip and then they have to reattach another color.
Right.
But this is a wonderful tip.
Well, thank you. And so this is how easy this is, and then you just put that around the edge of your quilt.
That's great. Thank you for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks for watching this episode of Quilt Central, number 211, Imagination Sensations. Join us next time for Dressed Up in Quilted Style, quilting something for ourselves. Quilt around the clock. Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program. Central is made possible in part by Bernina of America. Nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. Quilting Machines International, providing quilting machines and supplies for the world. Sulky of America, taking creativity to new heights with decorated threads, stabilizers, and books. American Professional Quilting Systems, hand-guided elegance. The American Quilters Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Paducah, McCracken County Convention and Visitors Bureau. Paducah, where no one is a stranger. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Celebrate quilting in your everyday living. To purchase videotapes of this or any episode of Quilt Central, you may call 1-866-PADUCAH.